Ever wonder if some people can sense when death is coming? Could your favorite celebrity have known their time was running out? Number 5. Bob Marley. Did Bob Marley know he wouldn't live to see old age? The reggae legend once told a friend, "I'll never reach 56." This eerily accurate prediction came true when Marley died from cancer at just 36 years old in 1981. Marley's journey toward this prediction began when he injured his toe during a soccer game in 1977. What seemed like a minor accident turned sinister when doctors discovered a form of malignant melanoma under his toenail. Against medical advice, Marley refused amputation, citing his Rastafarian beliefs that discouraged removing parts of the body. The cancer eventually spread throughout his body. During his final tour, Marley collapsed while jogging in Central Park and performed his last concert in Pittsburgh on September 23, 1980. As his health deteriorated, he sought treatment in Germany but soon realized it wasn't working. On his flight home to Jamaica, Marley's condition worsened dramatically, and he was rushed to a hospital in Miami where he died on May 11, 1981. His final words to his son Ziggy were reportedly, "Money can't buy life." Friends close to Marley weren't entirely surprised by his early departure. They recalled how he often spoke about not living a long life, with statements like, "I'll never reach 56, repeating in conversations. Whether intuition or acknowledgement of his lifestyle, Marley seemed to carry a quiet understanding that his time would be brief but impactful. What makes Marley's prediction particularly haunting is that his father died at 70, suggesting that Marley wasn't simply having his father's lifespan but genuinely sensed his own early demise. His legacy lives on decades later, with his music continuing to inspire generations of fans and musicians alike. Number 4. Mark Twain. Could someone predict their death based on a celestial event? Mark Twain did exactly that, connecting his life to Halley's Comet in one of history's most remarkable death predictions. Born Samuel Clemens on November 30, 1835, during an appearance of Halley's Comet, Twain maintained throughout his life that he would go out with it as well. Halley's Comet passes Earth approximately every 76 years, and Twain frequently mentioned this cosmic coincidence in conversations with friends and family. In 1909, Twain made his prediction explicit. "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it." He added, "It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. The Almighty has said, no doubt, now here are these two unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together." True to his prediction, Twain died of a heart attack on April 21, 1910, just one day after Halley's Comet reached its perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun. The comet was visible from Earth at the time of his death, creating a perfect cosmic symmetry to his life. What makes this prediction especially remarkable is its specificity and the astronomical odds against such a coincidence. Twain didn't simply have a vague feeling about his death. He tied it directly to an astronomical event that occurs once every 7 decades. Friends reported that Twain spoke about this connection with increasing frequency in his final years, showing no fear but rather a sense of cosmic rightness about the timing. His daughter Clara later wrote that her father seemed almost pleased when doctors confirmed his heart condition was worsening as the comet approached. The prediction became so well known that newspapers around the world noted the extraordinary coincidence when reporting his death. The New York Times headline read, "Halley's Comet comes and Twain goes right on schedule." Whether cosmic coincidence or self-fulfilling prophecy, Twain's prediction remains one of the most famous and accurate death premonitions in history. Number 3. Abraham Lincoln. Did President Lincoln foresee his assassination? Just days before his death, Lincoln described a dream that eerily predicted his own murder. In April 1865, Lincoln told his wife Mary and a few close friends about a disturbing dream he'd had. In the dream, he wandered through the White House, hearing sobbing but unable to find its source. When he entered the East Room, he saw a corpse on display. Guards stood nearby, and mourners filled the room. "Who is dead in the White House?" Lincoln asked a soldier in his dream. The president came the reply. He was killed by an assassin. Lincoln related this dream to his wife and to Ward Hill Lamon, his friend and occasional bodyguard, roughly 10 days before his assassination. Lamon was so disturbed by the account that he later included it in his memoirs. This wasn't Lincoln's only premonition. Throughout his presidency, he experienced several dreams and visions that seemed to forecast danger. In one recurring dream, he saw himself sailing on a strange vessel toward an unknown shore, which he interpreted as a sign of good news coming from the battlefield. He reportedly had this dream the very night before his assassination at Ford's Theater. What makes Lincoln's premonition particularly chilling is the specific imagery of assassination at a time when presidential security was relatively lax. Despite these warnings, Lincoln frequently dismissed concerns about his safety, once telling his bodyguards, "What good would it do to kill me? Another would just take my place." On the day of his assassination, April 14, 1865, Lincoln was unusually reflective. He spent time discussing funeral arrangements with Mary, telling her, "It is a good thing I am not a nervous person, for I would certainly be superstitious." That evening, he attended Ford's Theater without his regular security detail, where John Wilkes Booth fatally shot him. When Lincoln's body lay in state in the East Room of the White House, exactly as he had described in his dream, many of those who had heard his premonition were struck by the uncanny accuracy of the details. The room arrangement, the military guard, the mourners, all reflected precisely what Lincoln had described. Mary Todd Lincoln later became convinced her husband had known what was coming, telling confidants, his dream was prophetic. William Herndon, Lincoln's former law partner, would later write that Lincoln had strong tendencies to spiritualism and superstitions throughout his life, making his final premonition all the more significant. Number 2. John Lennon. Can a person predict their violent death years in advance? The former Beatle seemed to do exactly that, describing his fears of being murdered by a fan. From the early Beatles days, Lennon expressed an unusual preoccupation with dying young and violently. In interviews spanning his career, he repeatedly mentioned that fame might lead to his murder. In a particularly chilling 1965 interview, when asked how he might die, Lennon responded, "I'll probably be popped off by some loony." This statement came 15 years before Mark David Chapman, a disturbed fan obsessed with Lennon and his music, shot him outside his New York apartment building. As Lennon's fame grew, so did his concern about violent fans. He told journalist Ray Connolly, "We're going to get killed one of these days. It's going to be one of us." The assassination of his friend and inspiration Elvis Presley further cemented Lennon's belief that fame could lead to a violent end. In 1980, just months before his death, Lennon's premonitions intensified. During the recording of his final album, Double Fantasy, he told producer Jack Douglas, "I'm gonna be killed." Douglas later recalled how serious Lennon had been, not speaking philosophically but expressing a genuine fear. Perhaps most haunting was Lennon's final interview with Andy Peebles for the BBC, conducted just 3 days before his murder. In this conversation, Lennon revealed his anxiety about crazy people out there, saying, "You just never know when they're going to come at you." Hours after this interview aired in the UK, Lennon was shot 5 times by Chapman outside the Dakota Building. Prior to his death, Lennon had been receiving increasingly disturbing mail from fans. His wife Yoko Ono later revealed they had discussed the possibility of hiring additional security, but Lennon was reluctant to live in fear. What makes Lennon's premonition particularly notable is its specificity. He didn't simply fear death, he repeatedly expressed concern about being murdered by a deranged fan. This wasn't a general anxiety but a precise scenario that tragically came true on December 8, 1980. The lyrics to his songs also suggest an awareness of his fate. In Borrowed Time, written shortly before his death but released posthumously, Lennon sings, "Living on borrowed time without a thought for tomorrow." And in the Beatles' song Come Together, he wrote the line, "He got to be good looking 'cause he's so hard to see," words that would later appear in Chapman's copy of The Catcher in the Rye. Friends like Elton John recalled Lennon's increasing paranoia in his final years, with Lennon often looking over his shoulder and expressing unease about strangers approaching him. Was this the natural anxiety of a famous person, or did Lennon genuinely sense the violent end that awaited him? Number 1. Ernest Hemingway. Have you heard about Hemingway's tragic prediction? Years before his suicide, the famous author told friends he was being monitored by the FBI and would eventually kill himself, claims that were dismissed as paranoia but later proven true. In the late 1950s, Hemingway began telling friends and family that the FBI was following him, tapping his phones and monitoring his movements. His complaints became so persistent that many close to him, including his fourth wife Mary and his biographer I. Hotchner, became convinced he was suffering from paranoid delusions. "It's the worst hell," Hemingway told Hotchner. "The goddamnedest hell, they've bugged everything, that's why we're using Duke's car. Mine's bugged, everything's bugged, can't use the phone, they'll track us down, they'll tap the phone." The situation deteriorated to the point where Hemingway was admitted to the Mayo Clinic in 1960, ostensibly for treatment of high blood pressure, but actually to receive electroconvulsive therapy for what doctors diagnosed as paranoia. He underwent 20 electroshock treatments, which he claimed destroyed his memory and ability to write. Throughout this period, Hemingway repeatedly predicted his own suicide, telling his friend and physician Dr. George Saviers, "I'll get out of this by pulling the trigger." On July 2, 1961, he fulfilled this prediction, shooting himself with his favorite shotgun at his home in Ketchum, Idaho. What makes this case remarkable is that decades later, in the 1980s, the FBI released documents under the Freedom of Information Act confirming that Hemingway had indeed been under surveillance since the 1940s. J. Edgar Hoover had personally ordered the monitoring based on Hemingway's activities in Cuba and suspected communist sympathies. The revelation shocked those who had dismissed Hemingway's paranoia as mental illness. His friend Hotchner wrote a heartbreaking article in 2011 titled "Hemingway, Hounded by the Feds, Expressing Profound Regret." "In the years since, I have tried to reconcile Ernest's fear of the FBI, which I regretfully misjudged, with the reality of the FBI file. I now believe he truly sensed the surveillance." Some researchers suggest the electroshock therapy Hemingway received, partly to treat his delusions about FBI surveillance, contributed to his suicidal state. The treatment erased portions of his memory, which for a writer whose identity was built on experiences and the ability to recall them in vivid detail, was particularly devastating. "What these shock treatments did was wipe out a part of my memory, and it's been a great handicap," Hemingway told his friend Aaron Hotchner after a treatment session. "I tell you, it was a brilliant cure, but we lost the patient." In his final years, Hemingway repeatedly told friends he felt he had no choice but to end his life, believing he could no longer function as a writer. He made several suicide attempts before his final successful one, each time speaking about it with an eerie calm that suggested absolute certainty about his fate. The case represents one of literature's greatest tragedies, a man perceived as paranoid and delusional who was, in fact, correctly sensing the monitoring that was occurring. His prediction of suicide came true, at least partly because those around him couldn't believe his accurate perceptions of reality. Can some people truly sense when and how their lives will end? Or do these predictions reflect something else entirely, perhaps self-fulfilling prophecies or simply coincidences magnified by hindsight? What might your favorite celebrities know that they're not telling you?